The 6th of April, 1941, Yugoslavia. German aircraft appear over Belgrade before dawn, and within hours, bombs fall on the capital. The Yugoslav army collapses in less than 2 weeks, and the country is divided between occupying powers and puppet regimes. In Serbia, one of the most important parts of occupied Yugoslavia, German military authorities establish direct control and impose a regime built on fear. Arrests, executions, and hostage shootings become routine. Villages are searched, homes burned, and entire communities threatened with destruction if resistance fighters are suspected nearby. One such village is Kriva Reka, located on the slopes of the Kopaonik mountain. There, in October 1942, during a large anti-partisan offensive conducted by the SS division Prinz Eugen, 300 civilians will be shot, burnt inside the church, and buried beneath the ruins of their homes. However, this atrocity will not remain unpunished, and the perpetrators will pay for their crimes with their own lives. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland and set Europe on fire. In the months and years that followed, the war spread across the continent, and in April 1941 it reached Yugoslavia, where Nazi Germany launched a sudden attack, bombing Belgrade heavily from the air. Entire districts of the capital were destroyed. Thousands of civilians were killed or wounded, and the Yugoslav army soon collapsed. The state disintegrated, and its territory was divided among occupying powers and puppet regimes. A large part of Serbia was placed under direct German military administration. From the outset, rule was enforced through fear. Executions of hostages, mass arrests, and reprisals against civilians became routine instruments of control. Villages suspected of sheltering resistance fighters were burned, and communities were punished collectively for acts they had not committed. Resistance movements emerged soon after the occupation. Among them were the nationalist Chetniks, led by General Draža Mihailović, and the communist partisans under Josip Broz Tito. In the first years of occupation, the Germans regarded Mihailovic's forces as a serious threat, especially in mountainous regions where guerrilla warfare flourished. In central Serbia, Major Dragutin Keserović commanded the Rasina Corps of the Chetniks. His units operated in the Kopaonik mountain area and maintained strong ties with the local population. During 1942, Allied aircraft reportedly dropped weapons and equipment at Chetnik detachments in this region, increasing German suspicion that it had become a center of organized resistance. The decision to launch Operation Kopaonik, a large Axis offensive directed against the Chetnik movement in central Serbia, was shaped at the highest levels of the SS. Its leader, Heinrich Himmler, believed that the annihilation of Mihailović and his commanders was essential for securing Serbia and stabilizing southeastern Europe. The plan for the operation was prepared on the 30th of September 1942, and the formal order for its execution was issued 1 week later, on the 5th of October. The main striking force was the 7th SS Volunteer Mountain Division, Prinz Eugen. This division had been created at the end of 1941 and was recruited largely from the ethnic German minorities of southeastern Europe, known as Volksdeutsche. It was named after Prince Eugen of Savoy, a historical commander celebrated for his wars in the Balkans in the 17th and 18th century. The division was not designed for conventional frontline warfare, but for anti-partisan operations. From the beginning, it was shaped as an instrument of terror. Its first commander, Artur Fleps, trained the unit for mountain warfare and harsh reprisals of the civilians. Villages suspected of supporting resistance were to be destroyed and civilians treated as potential enemies. Alongside the SS division, several battalions of the Bulgarian 9th Infantry Division and elements of the Russian Protective Corps participated in the operation. The overall commander of the Axis forces in the operation was SS Brigadeführer Arthur Phleps. One of the main regiments involved was the 14th SS Infantry Regiment, commanded by August Schmidhuber. Its battalions were led by officers including Richard Kaserer. In total, more than 7,000 Axis soldiers were mobilized for this offensive against Chetniks in the Serbian mountains. Phleps instructed his troops to regard the entire population of the region as sympathizers of the rebels. This order removed any distinction between armed fighters and civilians. Operation Kopaonik was officially presented as a military action against insurgents, but from the outset, it carried the character of punitive expedition. The offensive began on the 11th of October, 1942. German battalions advanced toward the Kopaonik region from the cities of Kosovska Mitrovica, Rashka, and Novi Pazar, while Bulgarian forces moved from cities Brus and Aleksandrovac. On the 12th of October, the Axis troops completed the encirclement of a small rural village, Kriva Reka, believed to be the headquarters of the aforementioned Keserovich's Rasina Corps, and possibly the location of a British military mission. Yet, Keserovich and his soldiers had been warned, and he withdrew his forces into the mountains before the Axis encirclement closed. The main military objective failed, and the Chetnik units escaped. For the German command, however, failure was not an option, and harsh reprisals would follow. After the troops entered the village of Kriva Reka, they began a campaign of systematic destruction. Around 330 civilians were massacred. Of these, 270 were local inhabitants, nearly half of the village's population, while more than 60 came from nearby settlements. At least 46 victims were forced into the local church, where the doors were locked and the building was blown apart by explosives. Men, women, children, and elderly people who survived the initial explosion were burnt alive, and those who tried to escape from the building were shot. The massacre left Kriva Reka in ruins, as 100 houses were destroyed and thousands of livestock were stolen. However, the violence did not end there. Nearby villages were looted and destroyed, and hundreds more civilians were killed across the region. In total, Axis forces killed approximately 690 civilians during this operation in Kriva Reka and the neighboring area. Even within the German military administration, the scale of brutality caused unease. Paul Bader, the German military commander in Serbia, later requested that the SS division Prinz Eugen will refrain from killing civilians and burning villages without specific justification in the future. His concern was linked to discipline and long-term stability, not humanitarian principles. Nevertheless, the order acknowledged that the violence in Kriva Reka had been extreme even for Germans. Despite the failure to eliminate Keserovich and his units, Heinrich Himmler expressed satisfaction with the performance of the Prinz Eugen division. Shortly after the operation ended, Himmler visited the infamous division for 3 days. On the 18th of October 1942, he arrived in Kraljevo, a city in central Serbia, and celebrated the birthday of Prince Eugen of Savoy, together with the members of the division. Official praise overshadowed the civilian deaths. Operation Kopaonik marked only the beginning of a broader campaign of terror by the Prinz Eugen division. Through the winter of 1942 and into 1943, the division conducted further anti-partisan operations across Serbia, Bosnia, and Montenegro. Villages were burned, civilians executed, and entire communities destroyed. In early 1943, the division participated in large offensives against partisan forces, including operations that resulted in thousands of civilian deaths. Military objectives were often not achieved, but civilian populations paid the price. The pattern was consistent: encirclement, search, looting, burning, and execution. The massacre at Kriva Reka thus became part of a wider history of violence in occupied Yugoslavia. But the men from the SS division Prinz Eugen did pay for their crimes. Among them was Arthur Fleps, who had already been promoted to SS Obergruppenführer and commanded the division during the massacre. By the autumn of 1944, German control in southeastern Europe was disintegrating. Romania had changed sides in August. Soviet forces were advancing rapidly, and German units were retreating in confusion. On the 21st of September 1944, Fleps was traveling with only his adjutant and driver near the city of Arad in western Romania. He was attempting to assess the situation at the front while on his way to meet Heinrich Himmler in Berlin. Unaware that Red Army units had already reached the area, he entered the village of Simond in western Romania. Soviet troops were already present, and Fleps was captured without resistance. He was taken for interrogation and held in a local building. Later that same day, German aircraft attacked the village. During the chaos of the bombing, when Fleps, as well as other prisoners, attempted to escape, Soviet guards opened fire, and Fleps was shot and killed. August Schmidhuber, commander of the 14th SS Infantry Regiment during the time of the massacre in Kriva Reka, and later commander of the division, survived the fighting, but not the aftermath of the war. After Germany's defeat, the remnants of the division surrendered on the 11th of May 1945 near the city of Celje in Slovenia to Yugoslav partisan forces. Schmidhuber was taken into custody and transferred to Yugoslav authorities and was brought before a military tribunal. He was charged with direct participation and command responsibility for massacres, deportations, and systematic violence against the civilian population across Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, and Croatia. The court found him guilty, and on the 19th of February 1947, Schmidhuber was executed by hanging in Belgrade. Richard Kasserer, commander of one of the battalions involved in Operation Kopaonik, did not fare any better. After the war, he was captured in Norway, extradited to Yugoslavia, tried for war crimes including those committed in Kriva Reka, sentenced to death, and hanged in Belgrade on the 24th of January 1947. For the ordinary soldiers of Prinz Eugen, the end was far more chaotic and brutal. When the division surrendered after the war in Europe ended on the 8th of May 1945, thousands of its members fell into Yugoslav captivity. Almost all personnel of the division taken prisoner by the Yugoslav army was subsequently killed. These killings were carried out by partisan units at a local level, often as acts of revenge for years of terror and destruction. One of the largest known executions took place near the town of Brežice, in the eastern part of present-day Slovenia. Around the 22nd of May 1945, approximately 2,000 former members of the division, many of them ethnic Germans, were stripped naked, bound together with wire, shot, and buried in a mass grave in an abandoned trench. Later discoveries of mass graves in the area confirmed the scale of these killings. Similar executions occurred elsewhere, though exact numbers remain uncertain to this day. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.